Louisiana's high school football season is in the book after 8 state championships in Caesars Superdome. I'm Jarrett Roser. He's Sam Spiegelman. This is Louisiana versus All Y'all's Recruit That Boot, and we were both on that Superdome turf for 8 straight games, Thursday through Saturday. Some close games overall, some really chaotic finishes, honestly, and some great performances in all of these. And so, as always, we love to talk about some of the top prospects we have a chance to see, and there were a lot of great ones to choose from. Sam, how did it feel just to be back out there on that Superdome turf for some of these? You didn't get a chance to get out to as much football this fall as usually is the case, as you were in paternity mode, but you were back there for a big helping to end the season for sure.
Yeah, incredible games, some really fantastic performances, some really big showings by a lot of the guys that we're about to go over. But, just, again, really competitive high school state championships for the most part, exhilarating finishes. You hate seeing Louisiana officiating go viral, but, that was the case. It kind of encapsulated everything this weekend. Also reminded me that paternity mode has put me way out of shape because I ran across those sidelines and my heart was dragging. So, goals for 2026 is to definitely get back into better shape for the off season. But we had some great performances to talk about, Jarrett.
Let's go ahead and get into them, and we'll kind of do one of our episodes where we go back and forth and use, we'll trade turns as kind of the opportunity to pick a player or a couple players to talk about. And so we'll each take 4 turns. We'll probably end up still talking about more than 8 guys because there are, dozens that we realistically could get to that were impressive. But let's go ahead and get started and just kind of use that as a loose structure and see where we end up. So, Sam, I'll let you go first, just kind of somebody that we should talk about coming out of that weekend.
Yeah, I thought the absolute MVP of the weekend in terms of number one top performer, best performance, through was Elijah Haven. Of course, he is the number one quarterback in the country for the 2027 class. Looked like the number one quarterback prospect in the country in the 2027 class. We already know that he has every single Dunham record, and he will have a whole other year to build on that. But he moved into the lead with several more state records in terms of touchdowns and passing touchdowns in a single season, total touchdowns in a single season. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. We both know the Calvary defensive game plan for Elijah was to force him to basically attacking his weaknesses and force him to make great decisions and rely on his legs. And he called his number 27 times. He piled up over 150 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. He was near perfect through the air. One kind of insane play by a Calvary cornerback that was in the right spot at the right time on a throwaway, but almost nearly perfect, very precise, accurate anticipation, tearing up this Calvary defense, which has been absolutely stout from the entire season, has been the heart and soul of the Calvary team, has been that defense. Speaking to coaches the next morning in the Superdome on the phone, walking to the Superdome, we're calling him Baby Cam Newton. That's I think that was a very fair comparison for Elijah. I just think, again, in terms of prospects, having covered guys like Keyshawn Henderson and Keelan Russell the past couple of years, guys that have continued to take strides year to year, have immense physical talent and incredible arm talent. Elijah checks all those boxes. He team focused as opposed to individualistic. He won the Gatorade Player of the Year, and his seems completely unfazed at the podium talking about it, just getting to this moment for his teammates. I was so vastly impressed with him. I thought he was a clear front runner as a top performer of the weekend.
Yeah, and you and I talked about it some. I don't remember if it was that next day or at some point over the last couple of days, but Elijah brushes off those individual accolades so quickly. You can tell that he really genuinely wants to talk about the team, and he's honestly just more responsive in general when he knows that you want to talk about the team and not about him doing this or him doing that, which is becoming more and more difficult for him to kind of manage because there's more and more stuff to talk about with him and setting statewide records with a whole extra year left of his high school career. And this one was so impressive because, as you mentioned, Calvary Baptist went into this game and they wanted to keep everything in front of them. Dunham wants to throw the ball and they want to throw the ball downfield, and Calvary put 3 safeties back much of the game and wanted to dare him to run at times, see if he could establish stuff there. But other than that, have to kind of settle for things underneath. And he ends up with a 400 plus overall total yardage game where after an early 3 and out, he really did start just methodically moving the ball down the field in which way that they would give it to him. And some of those runs were pretty impressive. As much as he's more wired to keep his eyes downfield and throw the ball, he was out there breaking tackles and, popping spin moves and making guys miss in the open field for some nice chunk gains, which I know was making Coach Weiner smile. He talked some earlier this year about wanting to continue to instill it in Elijah to run when that's what's there and not, spend too much time or not take that when that's there. And he certainly took what was there and took what was there again for 400 yards and a state championship victory. That was the Tigers' first since 2004.
And this is the second year that Elijah has put up almost nearly 500 yards and 4+ touchdowns in the Superdome, getting Dunham to this point. I think he has clearly established himself as the number 1 quarterback in not only the country, but in the state of Louisiana, moving into their senior years. It's going to be a fun offseason between him and Pop Houston and Malachi Ziegler, who are all fantastic quarterbacks, 3 of the best in the country. But it's, of course, going to be interesting to see how the offseason goes in terms of final rankings and whatnot. And, of course, Elijah isn't here without the play of another top performer, Jarvis Washington, who, much like Elijah, becomes Dunham's all-time leading receiver in a single season in terms of yardage, receptions, and touchdowns. Again, we talked about this Calvary defense, knowing with Jarvis Washington's skill set, the future South Alabama Jaguar, and Jarvis had the game that the Calvary defensive coaches feared that he would do, is be able to play above the rim, make contested catches outside the numbers, compete for 50-50 balls at a really high clip. And of course, at 6'3", almost 190, 200 pounds, break open in the open field away from 2-3 tacklers and make damage after the catch. And Jarvis was a big reason why Dunham was able to have such a sustainable big play passing attack.
Yeah, highlighting that 168 yards, he had that 77-yard catch and long run, which was, I think, about the time that Josh Preston was trying to beat Jarvis down the sideline, running toward you and saying, you got to 4-star him. But good for Jarvis, too. He and I talked going into the Dome about, as an underclassman, he was a state runner-up in basketball, back-to-back years with Madison Prep. As a junior, he's a state runner-up in football with the Dunham Tigers. And so he was pretty sick of silver and ready to get that gold on the way out the door and gets the big trophy with this Tigers football team on his way, as you mentioned, to go join that South Alabama program now. Looking at another interesting duo, I guess, to start, and probably not 2 of the guys that around the state the casual fan would have been going in and saying, this is someone that they're definitely going to be talking about coming out of this. But the Iowa duo of Jeremiah Bushnell and Kayston Lewis were absolutely phenomenal. This was the next game on the slate after that Thursday night game. These guys go out and spearhead a 50-point performance in a first ever state championship appearance for the Iowa Yellow Jackets and a first ever, obviously, state championship for those guys. Kayston, 15 carries for 172 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jeremiah with 4 catches for 112 and 3 scores, plus 44 yards on 3 carries and another score there. And Kayston also, one of the top tacklers on that defense, a guy that I kind of thought had as much potential as anyone to be kind of a breakout candidate from this. He'd been great for them all season, but wasn't someone we were talking a lot about. And he kind of forced the issue that he was going to have to be someone we were talking about coming out of this. And I thought both those guys were excellent in their respective roles. Kayston as that safety and running back, and Jeremiah as a versatile offensive weapon, where his ability to make tough catches through contact, get up over defenders and come down with tough catches, as well as, in the run game or a quick passing game, get the ball in his hands, make guys miss, and then open up his stride down the field for some big gains that way as well. Coach Tommy Johns said that this was maybe the best game that he's had, that it was certainly his night to kind of lead the way, and was the outstanding player winner voted on by the media. But I thought either one of these guys could have won that award, and it just been fine.
You talked about some of the punishing hits that Jeremiah Bushnell took and held on through contact. That was about as noticeable a takeaway from this weekend as any. You're right. From speaking to some of the IOA coaches, some people from the Lake Charles area about Bushnell, this was a hidden gem that's tucked away in the 337, and not a lot of coaches went to Iowa to look at these two young men. Credit to Willie Fritz and that Houston staff for finding, I believe, is someone who's going to make an impact sooner rather than later. You talked about the physicality, not only as a blocker, but in space. He housed a sweep around the edge, beat an entire defense around the corner with that speed. He's about 6'3", 185 pounds. I was really impressed. I had him as my number 2 overall performer on the weekend. Again, credit to the Cougars. I think Jeremiah Bushnell is a stud, someone who, in my opinion, now is a little bit underrated given his final ranking. We'll see if that is tweaked before the end of the year. And then Kason Lewis, that is your boy Jarrett, and someone who our good friend Dwayne Jenkins compared to Jarvis Landry. We got to see him up close, and he is slippery. He is elusive. He is so smooth, not only playing running back, but seeing very critical snaps at cornerback. Like you said, was not afraid to be physical and tackle. He had a pass defended, playing man coverage. Really effective, north of 11 yards per carry. Jeremiah Bushnell went severely under-recruited. Thankfully, Houston saw that. Let's hope that Kason Lewis used this as a platform, as a stage, because he is a Power 4 athlete. And hopefully that coaches were paying attention to this, because he was one of the best performers in the Superdome this weekend.
No doubt. Houston went ahead and I don't know, as someone that already had the commitment and now signature of Jeremiah Bushnell, why it took to this point to make the offer for Kason, because he's been great for those guys, but he does now have the Houston offer. And I think coming off of that Superdome appearance and performance, Kason has a chance to be one of the real breakout prospects in terms of picking up a ton of traction around the state, coming out of all this. 2 really impressive performances. And I think Houston is a great landing place for Jeremiah, but he may look like a steal here pretty quickly. And again, I think Kason Lewis is about to have that offer sheet blow up here sooner than later.
No question. Let's talk about our maybe a top performer who did not come out with a state title. Elijah Haven is the number 1 quarterback in the country for 2027. Ahmad Hudson is the number 1 tight end in the country for 2027. And Jarrett, there was a point in this game where he looked like he was going to literally and physically carry the Bearcats to another state title, even though they came up short. And of course, he had a turnover in this game, more so as a result of a fantastic play from Ouachita Parish's defensive backfield. Ahmad Hudson was absolutely superb. 6 catches, 179 yards, a touchdown, maybe almost a second. This was the kind of performance that I think if you're a fan of Ahmad, you've kind of been waiting for potentially all season. He just took over this game, making big plays in the middle of the field, outside the numbers, big catches, big runs after the catch, big catches with defenders in his face. We saw basically the upside of having this freakish 6'6", 230-pound pass catcher who can get loose and also is a hell of a blocker. Ahmad Hudson, Ruston did not come out on top, but I don't think anyone left the Superdome on Saturday thinking Ahmad Hudson was not the best player on the field when Ruston and Ouachita Parish played.
I was asked about him on radio Monday afternoon, and in the question, the fumble late was kind of mentioned as sort of, you have to kind of put that clarifier on there of yes, we recognize that this happened late, but the performance was phenomenal. And he was clearly so heartbroken that play happened that way. And I mean, your heart goes out to him. Hopefully he's shaking back from that quickly and well, and realizing that they're not in that position to have a chance late without him. They're not probably not in the dome without him and the performance that he's had. Obviously, I mean, this team, as well as anyone, knows next man has to step up. And so I don't want to, you don't give too much credit to Ahmad, but Ahmad was a huge piece of the run that this Bearcats team had this season, and had another phenomenal game where during the course of that, he was one of the most talked about players for fans and media, and for the college coaches that were able to be in attendance. With the recruiting calendar changing up, it's only the FCS coaches that we get a chance to see now in the Superdome. But obviously, a lot of folks that were incredibly impressed by him. The freakish athleticism and fluidity and body control he has at that 6'7" frame. And I've just been interested throughout his high school career to watch how much more physical and tough he can get, because early on you could tell he was kind of a big basketball player out there on the football field that had some athletic traits, but how does he grow into a more well-rounded football player? And I think year over year, we see more of those strides. His ability to break tackles in this game and have yards after not only the catch, but after contact, was something that stood out in addition to everything else that Ahmad's going to bring to the table.
He has just an immense catch radius that, at 6'6", you already have this distinct head over every other defender. And then when you can also reach an additional, 4 feet, either direction and make an athletic grab, he's a quarterback's dream to be able to throw to someone that big, that athletic, that can get that much ground covered so quickly and do that with the ball in his hands. It's absolutely outrageous. It was great to see him. I have a feeling we'll be seeing Rustin again in the Superdome before too long. Let's stick with the 318. Isaiah Washington is signed with LSU. We've seen him in the Superdome quite a few times, Jared, but this, I think, was his best performance yet. Finally gets Haynesville over the hump. Unsurprisingly, an MVP performance in the process. We know he's going to play safety at the next level. He returned an interception, I think 77 yards, if I'm not mistaken. He had multiple tackles. He's playing both ways. I love the ability that he's doing that in the state championship game. Even when it looked like maybe stamina was running low, he's still finishing off tackles. He's very feisty around the football, and very, very sound in coverage. Not only did we see the interception, we saw him play a ball very soundly in coverage in the middle of the field, very natural. So I think he's going to fit right into the LSU defensive secondary. And also seeing him play offense, we've seen this quite a few times, but he's a spark plug. He has great speed in the open field. He's very elusive, toting the football. Piled up, I think it was two long touchdowns, 20 and 54 yards. Just absolute MVP performance from someone who's been there, done that, and I love safeties that play offense in high school, whether it's receiver or quarterback. And we've seen a lot of great ones from Louisiana go and do that at LSU. And I think Isaiah Washington has convinced me he might be the next.
He's someone that we've mentioned before. In 2 runner-up performances, he was as much of a bright spot as Haynesville had in those games against Oak Grove and South Plaquemine in the last couple of years. And so it was honestly somewhat surprising it took so long for his recruiting process to take off, not until this past May, because we had a chance to watch him in the Superdome the past couple of Decembers. But to see him get this opportunity after everything that he and his senior class have done and meant for that Haynesville program, and trying to get back over the hump. They have more state championships than any other public school in the state, but it had been since 2014 since they had a chance to bring one back up there to the northwest corner of the state. To see them go out with this opportunity was great, and to see Isaiah be able to play the monster role that he did with those 2 touchdowns you mentioned, where he, one from past midfield where he's able to open up that speed and outrun a Mangum team that has some good speedy athletes. You saw a lot from him on that side of the ball. And then you mentioned similarly on the interception, and you say he had a couple tackles, a few tackles. That was something early on in this game that I know some folks were asking about is how does he look in terms of the physical element of playing safety? Because it's obviously going to be a big jump from being Haynesville's quarterback to being an LSU safety in the secondary there in the SEC. He had 14 tackles, game high 14 tackles, 12 of them solo stops. And so that was one of the higher totals of the weekend in any of the 8 games. And I think, again, there will certainly be a transition and a learning curve for him to make that jump up to the SEC, but you're seeing a lot of encouraging signs from him at the high school level as he wraps up his great career.
100%. I could.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Yeah, I was just going to transition to, stick with 318 a little bit more. We talked about that Ruston team and the runner-up from the Division I non-select game and Ahmad Hudson. And look, shout out to his quarterback, a first-year starter there, Sam Hartwell, who was good for those guys running the football and throwing the football to Ahmad and company. But the Ouachita Parish Lions came out on top of that game, 21-20. Being able to slow that Bearcats offense down enough to make some things happen. We talk about the late takeaway. That was Wydell Clark Jr. who caught back up with Ahmad and punched that ball out. Wydell has been great for those guys in all 3 phases, his entire career, really, and certainly this season, and was again in this game. And so some of his playmaking, the guy that everyone knows from that defense, Dylan Berryman on the front end, he had some nice stops, including some stops behind the line to help disrupt the running game at some points and get the ball back to that Ouachita offense. But that defense was just great all season, great through the playoff run, and Dylan Berryman kind of setting the table, making it tough to run between the tackles and letting guys like Wydell, fast physical athletes, fly around all over the field and make plays. Just really impressed yet again with that group. Dylan's someone we're waiting to see what's next for him now at the college level. Wydell as well. Dylan's the top remaining unsigned prospect, Louisiana. Wydell, I'm hoping has someone figured out and give him a good late chance here. But just kind of curious your thoughts on that Ouachita defense as a whole, and then also using it as a jumping off point for what's the latest with Dylan and how serious of a contender LSU is with Nebraska and some others in his process.
Yeah, Wydell, first to start, not only did he make the game-changing play on the defensive side of the ball, and we love that he's playing both sides of the ball in this championship game, which speaks volumes about this senior playing in his final high school game and hopefully not his final football game. Dylan Berryman doing the same. Not only was he, what I was calling him all weekend, the bull in the backfield, making these big splash plays behind the line of scrimmage, but Dylan also lining up as H-back, got hurt even because he's bulldozing guys to clear running lanes for guys like Wydell and his quarterback, like you said, who made some fantastic throws, big-time throws in this game. But additionally, we talked about Dylan Berryman, and from a recruiting standpoint, I think that Nebraska is currently setting the pace in this recruitment. They were close to getting him on campus for an official visit, but of course, the Lions season went on. Dylan was very focused on his high school football playoffs, getting them back to the Superdome, getting them over the hump of Ruston. He's going to officially visit Lincoln in January. LSU, Georgia are a couple of other teams that are pushing for official visits potentially. A couple of other teams are, of course, making contact, like you said. The top 30 defensive linemen in the country, one of the top unsigned 2026 players, and, of course, a position of high value as an interior defensive lineman. But it's right now, I would say that Nebraska is going to be hard to beat at the moment.
Mentioning another guy who we felt like we knew where he was going to go for a long time, and then there was some of that uncertainty of signing day week of just timeline of all of it. This performance from Richard Anderson was not the Dome week performance of last year, where he was able to just, demolish the Alexandria offense. But in this Division I select game where Edna Carr is able to, again, win a state championship, I thought, kind of like I led with Dylan, Rich is just the anchor to that, where he eats blocks and other guys are able to fly around and make plays at will, because so much attention has to focus on Big Rich in the middle of that Edna Carr defensive line. And so he kind of set the table. Guys like Jules Batiste and Romeo Brown and Kevin Martin and Ian Gray and company, all in that defensive line and linebacking core, were everywhere and coming up with one big splash play after another. And Ed Nakar was really good defensively. I mean, at all three levels, once again, to go out there and win a big one against a St. Aug team that is one of the other best teams in the state. But Ed Nakar just kind of keeps on rolling in dominant fashion and ends up winning its 27th straight game, its second straight state championship, and has folks having all those conversations again, the kind of hypotheticals of, Ed Nakar versus a small college team, who wins type conversations, and where does this Ed Nakar team stack up with the great defenses and great teams that have come through Louisiana and all those type of things. You and I both had a chance to talk to Rich afterward about some of the recruiting stuff, as well as just how proud he is of his progress as a leader and face of this group, and someone that Coach Bryce Brown said early on thought he had the chance to be as good as any defensive lineman to come through that place. And obviously they've had some great ones. And so some wake-up calls from Bryce early on to make sure that he had Rich motivated to reach his potential, and super impressive to watch the overall progress of Rich and the way that he was able to finish, and right in line with that whole group around him, the consistency that they've shown the last couple of years, and their ability these last couple of Decembers to be at their absolute best when it mattered most in the Superdome has been really impressive. And it's a as they mentioned, a bittersweet moment, because now we get to / have to see all those guys disperse and go to all these colleges all over the place. But it has been awesome to watch them together these last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it last year. Big Rich had what I felt was the MVP performance for Ed Nakar. He swallowed up JT Lindsay more times than JT probably wants to admit. And he made his presence felt against that really stout Alexandria offensive line. And I thought it was criminal that he didn't get the MVP last year. This year, he certainly was I think you said it right, he is the anchor of an Ed Nakar defense that held St. Aug, which our boy Robert Valdez will tell you starts and ends in the trenches and running the football to under 3 yards a carry. That defense forced 6 turnovers of St. Aug, and Big Rich forced one of them himself by batting down a pass at the line of scrimmage. I was ISO'd on him for good chunks of this game. He's going through 2 to 3 offensive linemen, and he is at will getting through eventually and still forcing pressures. He to be that massive at 6'4", 320 plus pounds, and move like that, to chase down and pressure quarterbacks, to be able to withstand and power through those blockers with finesse, with power, with just incredible athleticism. I think Bryce Brown said it absolutely best. He is the best defensive player in the country. I think he is the best defensive player that has ever played for Ed Nakar High School. He's certainly the best defensive lineman. I saw Gerald Willis. I saw Andre Anthony. I saw Tyjee Hill, and these are all players that Bryce has spoken very highly of. And I think that Richard Anderson is undoubtedly the best. And I'd actually add that Aiden Hall might be a pretty close second. Aiden also didn't have the statement pick 6 like he did in the beginning of the Alexandria game last year, but is an enforcer on that defense and such a tone setter. And Ed Nakar has had so many tone setters, but Aiden Hall is basically a part of that second level that you mentioned that these other guys feasted on because of Big Rich. Now, on the other side of the ball, I thought we saw a different sort of Carr offense that we are so accustomed to. The fantastic quarterback play and explosive big plays in the passing game with guys like Destin Hill and Aaron Anderson and Teron Francis and Racy McMath, you name it. So many stud receivers that have come through Algiers. This was a game predicated on the running game, and Trey Garrison was the absolute bell cow. I think he carried the ball 40 times, Jarrett. Around the goal line, he was dragging defenders through. He was punishing the St. Aug defense, which played really well for most of this game. But Trey Garrison was the tone setter on offense. We don't get to say that too often. But Ed Nakar has Jeremy Macklin behind him. Jamon Macklin behind him. Excuse me, I couldn't think of his first name. really talented 2027 running back, but they leaned on Trey in this game, and Trey ate almost 185 yards, including a touchdown. Absolute tone setter. 2 Edna Carr Cougars that were absolutely unsolvable in this win.
Yeah, if you ever lose track, and unfortunately my internet glitched up there at the wrong time because I would have caught it more quickly. But I think they called Jamon Pee-wee, if I'm not mistaken. I've had one of the other players have to go catch him post game to make sure I tracked him down for an interview. And so that may help if you just settle on Pee-wee, if that is indeed his nickname. But yeah, Trey Garrison, the senior who's heading to Washington State, was a monster. 41 carries for 183 yards and a touchdown. Quarterback John Johnson right there kind of complimenting him at times, ends up with 20 yards rushing, but able to finish some drives and get in the end zone 4 times, was 15 for 18 through the air with a touchdown and no interceptions. Last year was kind of a boomer bust type, high risk, high reward performance for John. This was a much more efficient. He did not turn the ball over in this game, and that was so helpful for them to be able to blow this game open and get a big margin of victory against St. Aug, because they won that turnover margin so handily because the offense took care of the ball. Meanwhile, the defense is out there feasting on takeaways. And wanted to add with Rich before we move on as well, talking about the athleticism and his ability to kind of disrupt some things and get after the opposing passer. This dude at whatever it is now, 6'4", 330, is like a weirdly sideline to sideline defensive tackle. His ability to get out to either sideline at his size is a little bit insane. And that was critical for them the last time they were in the Dome against American Heritage earlier this season. They get into overtime, and big number 7 is the guy that's out there on the perimeter, slowing down an American Heritage run to let his teammates swarm around and shut it down to win that game. There was a play late in this game with the game already out of hand, or well in hand and out of reach for St. Aug, where he narrowly missed getting to a running back for a stop there out toward the home sideline. And again, this is a point in the game where it was, I think, the fourth quarter. They're up several scores, and your LSU signed defensive tackle is flying around trying to get out to the sideline to not allow anything else, because that's just kind of the way that he's wired at this point. And so that little moment is something that stood out to me, to watch him be diving to the sideline to try and make stops in the fourth quarter of that type of game. LSU fans should be extremely excited.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think I probably said it on the podcast, but over the last 2 years, no defensive player, I think, has been higher on LSU's board than Big Rich Anderson. Someone on that LSU staff called Jakeem Stewart an absolute freak, but called Richard Anderson the best defensive lineman in the state, not only as a junior going into his junior year, but going into his senior season. No arguments from me, Jarrett. And let's also throw in one more Cougar, because why the heck not? Greg Wilfred with 80 yards, 5 catches in this game, nearly turned a 50-plus yard punt return into a touchdown, which certainly would have had us talking about him amongst the top performers in the MVPs. Like John Johnson, he's heading to West Virginia. He kind of fits the mold of those Tavon Austins, and a little bit shorter but extremely explosive, elusive, home run gadget players. Greg Wilfred, good for him for transferring from Destrehan and getting himself a ring before he goes to Morgantown.
I smiled that you mentioned Greg, because if you hadn't, I had kept their stat book open for a second to make sure to include Greg in there. That West Virginia connection from John to Greg was huge for those guys on offense, as a passing game complement to everything that Trey was doing on the ground. And a great way to finish a high school career for old G Smoke, who we've been watching since he was a freshman at Destrehan, and has been, I guess, partially because of just being a little bit smaller of an athlete, has been overlooked and underrated at times. But if you talk to defensive backs that have tried to guard him throughout his high school career, they will tell you that he is a nightmare and one of the toughest people that they've had to try to keep under wraps. And so excited for him to be able to finish on a really high note.
I think he's one of 47 high school signees for West Virginia in this cycle, for fun facts.
Where do we go from here? Let's let's shout out a couple more guys. I hate to potentially overlook another champion, but someone that was definitely a talking point coming out of this game and had a lot of folks asking about him was big number 1 for Gina, tall, long wide receiver Zadrian Cooper, who, again, a Gina team that you're expecting to be running the ball more than anything with Daniel Hatcher and Cedric Wilson, who both had great games combined for about 200 yards. But Zadrian Cooper with 4 catches for 125 yards and a touchdown, big plays downfield, big plays, getting up in the air over smaller defenders. And Coach Lee Doty from that Sterlington team talked about the biggest difference for the Panthers to be able to come back from a halftime deficit was they finally had to sell out and double up on Zadrian Cooper to slow down some of the things that he was doing, catching those passes from Deuce McPherson. I don't know what's next for Zadrian, but he is one of those kind of under the radar prospects in this senior class that I think, because of his performance in the Superdome, may have a chance to find himself a home somewhere and go figure out a college opportunity, because he was a really good looking tall target for the Gina Giants.
Yeah, a lot of people asking about him after the game. Why isn't, he being recruited? McNeese was in the building, Southern, Grambling. Hopefully they don't wait much longer before they extend an offer. 2 more from my end, especially in the 2027 class. Our boy Rontre Shark Carter from Shaw. Shaw looked like they were about to be back-to-back state champions. If they did, I think Rontre Carter would have been a very worthy MVP candidate. You talked about what Isaiah Washington did with 14 tackles. Rontre had a dozen himself, including 2 tackles for loss. We saw him play in the nickel. We saw him play basically on the line of scrimmage as a linebacker. This kid is physical. He's quick. He finds the football. He has fantastic timing. He delivers big pop, and he's pretty sound in coverage. And then, of course, our guy, Miguel Whitley, again, on the wrong side of the AUG card game, but really excellent player for St. Aug. You talked about some of these tough catches that he made through getting hit very hard in the middle of the field, outside the numbers. He took a beating and held on. He is explosive with the ball in his hands. He makes it look so natural. Kind of gives me Odell Beckham vibes for the young St. Aug wide receiver who is one of my personal favorites for the 2027 class. I think he's going to be someone potentially playing back in the Superdome next season with this very young AUG team.
Yeah, there were a lot of teams, and I feel like every single year you hear a lot of coaches and kids wrap up their dome weekend saying, we'll be back, whether trying to go repeat or trying to get back and get over the hump. And I think this year you heard it a lot. And in a lot of cases, including St. Aug, there are plenty of very tangible reasons when you look at that roster to expect that could very well be the case, because this was a pretty young St. Aug team that has a lot of 2027s and 2028s. And, even some 2029s that are already a part of that varsity roster that are really talented athletes. And Miguel and that deep receiving core, they'll have a lot of those weapons back, including his kind of partner in crime will be back healthy next year, Raekwon Williams. But that's a deep group that those have been kind of the 2 headliners, but they're not alone. And then similarly, Rontre and company with that Shaw team, there's a lot that's going to be back from that team. Rontre, you said, had the 12 solo stops. He had 15 total tackles, the 2 for loss. Him and Jackson Williams, the senior, were hard-hitting tone setters early in that game. Nearly came away with a goal line stop on that first St. Charles possession. Honestly, kind of a controversial close call on that opening touchdown for St. Charles that I know some folks on the West Bank still don't think that the Comets' 4th down run got in there. But the fact that you even got to that 4th down was due in no small part to the way that Rontre and Jackson were leading that defense. And on the flip side, what a first year starting at quarterback for Alan Shaw III, the basketball player / defensive back who now comes in and has to fill big shoes this year as a starting quarterback for a reigning state champion, where Mason Wilson was so big for those guys last year. And Alan was the outstanding player winner for the Eagles in this one for everything that he did, including his 2 touchdown runs. He ended up finishing 14 carries for 126 yards, 2 touchdowns, and was 4 for 7 through the air with a a really nicely thrown touchdown to tight end Elliott Love. And so some key pieces back for those guys for sure.
I know that if you asked Hank Tierney this time last year after they won if they'd be back in the Superdome, he would say, "What are you drinking? What's in your coffee cup?" But I got a feeling that he probably thinks he's got a team ready to be right back in this position this time next year.
I think some of that is exactly why he seemed to be having so much fun with this year's team, because he said after the game, he was more proud of this team than last year's state championship team, because last year he felt like they had talent-wise the best team and should have won. This year was a team that kind of exceeded some expectations, and the way that they came together, went through some adversity and hit their stride through the playoff run, and then were in position there to win into the final minute of the state championship game. He was just excited about the way this group came together. He's excited about what that means for this group's future next year. And so keep an eye on those Eagles next year. Keep an eye on those Purple Knights. One of the teams we didn't talk about today, but Riverside Academy, those Rebels, they have a lot of youth on that team that will be interesting to watch with, Chris Becknell and Boogie Johnson and company that were big roles for the state championship team. They're first since 2016. So, great season in 2025. A lot of these guys we're going to be talking about again in 2026, whether at the next college level or talking about potentially getting back to the Dome. And I'm looking forward to this offseason and seeing some of the strides made across the board.
I hang up my cleats on Saturday night after a trip to Jerry's World, but I'm still like about a fifth of the way into catching your total for the year, Jared. So you settle down, and I'll meet you this offseason.
Yep, this week is a lot of wrap-up content, and then I'll finally at some point watch some of these new Stranger Things episodes and start looking at some basketball and some 7-on-7
Are they
stuff.
out?
Some of the episodes came out like in November, but I realized there was no way I was getting to them until football season was over.
Who knew? We're on the moon?
I think most people who aren't us knew. I know some, Cole Miller, who was in the Dome shooting some photographs for me this weekend. He's already knocked them out. And when I asked if he had watched them yet, he started to get dangerously close to spoiler mode. And I said, whoa. I haven't watched them yet. I was just checking to see if you had, because I needed to get through football season before we could start thinking about Netflix, man.
Something about the Millers, man. They're wild.
No doubt. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Roser. Shout out Luke Miller too, who finished his high school career in the Dome. Had a really nice game for that Calvary Baptist team in the runner-up performance against Calvary Baptist. Had a great punt return early, was all over the field, making tackles on defense, had a fake punt completion for a big 4th down conversion for those guys. And so, yeah, one more Miller shout out on the way out, I guess. But again, he's Sam Spiegelman. Go ahead.
And one more shout out. Let's stick with the Calvary theme. Much like Hank Tierney, Rodney Guin said this was one of the most fun he's ever had coaching, which you love to see with these coaches. I think he said he's been coaching for 43 years. And again, I mean, we used him in context with Elijah Haven because, he coached Dak, he's coached Landry Liddy, he's coached Pop Houston, he's coached Abram Wardell, he's coached a lot of great quarterbacks. And to hear this Calvary team that overachieved largely to this fantastic defense, if I may add, get to the Dome. He had a lot of fun coaching. So shout out to our favorite veteran coaches out there in the booth.
I was really worried for a second there that you were going to say old coaches, and I was going to jump your case a little bit. So I'm glad
that's not in my vocabulary. Get out of here.
Good. Yeah. It was great to see those. It was great to see those young men, Rodney Guin and Hank Tierney and company, having the time of their lives out there in the Superdome for sure. Again, he's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Roser. Great seeing everybody in the Superdome this weekend. Looking forward to seeing everyone else out there soon. It's off-season mode, but the show doesn't stop, man. There's so much to keep track of in the off-season, so make sure you're keeping up with us throughout. Long way until that 2026 season kicks off, but the process building toward that is already underway for programs all over the state. Thanks for tuning in, as always, to Louisiana Versailles Recruit That Boot. Y'all be well. See y'all soon.